when we did eventually sell that house in the summer of 2020, we had paid down our mortgage to almost nothing. We owed $90,000 on that house, and it had also appreciated a lot in the 7 years that we'd owned it. So suddenly we had a huge amount of equity that we were able to then redeploy into our home where we live here now in North Carolina.
Welcome to the Physicians and Properties Podcast, the show where we teach you how investing in real estate can give you the freedom to practice medicine and live life how you want.
Doctor! 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 Doctor!
Now, here's your host, Dr. Alex Schloe.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Physicians and Properties Podcast. Today's guest knows what it takes to go from house hacking your first property to managing millions in commercial real estate. Neil Henderson is here on the podcast. He is an incredible real estate investor, co-host of the Truly Passive Income podcast, of which I was just recently a guest on. It was a great conversation. And general partner at Nomad Capital, which is a self-storage syndication firm based in the beautiful Wilmington, North Carolina. Over his career, Neil has been part of more than 75 million in commercial transactions. He's raised over 17 million in investor equity. He's built a portfolio of more than 311,000 rentable square feet of self-storage space. What makes Neil's journey unique is his perspective from house hacking is a pathway into real estate and fire to transitioning out of a nearly 2-decade career as a defense contractor and now teaching others how to leverage what they already have, time, experience, or money to build lasting wealth. I'm excited to dive in. Neil, thanks for coming on the podcast. How are you?
Absolutely, Alex. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I had such a great time with you and Clint on your Truly Passive Income podcast. I knew I had to get you on, so I really appreciate you making the time. Let's start kind of from the beginning. Neil, can you walk us through your story, what life looked like before real estate, how you stumbled into house hacking in Las Vegas, and what that has led to for you going forward?
Yeah, I'll try to keep this brief so I don't meander, and then you can stop and ask me questions. I was a failed landlord and a failed accidental landlord. I bought my first piece of real estate in 2005 in Las Vegas. It was a 3-bedroom, 2-bath condo that had doubled in value in a year, and that should have been my first warning sign. Bought it with the intent to live in it. That was my first house, first time I'd had really much disposable income in my 30s. And so figured, hey, it was time to get into the housing market. Did that, things were looking good, got married, decided we needed to upgrade, bought another house in Las Vegas in 2013, kind of at the bottom of the market. After watching the value of that condo, I think I bought it for $205. I think when I finally sold it when it was worth about $60,000 during the Great Recession. Short sold it, got out of that. And you can ask more questions about that, how I got out of it. But my wife and I were in a house that had a guest house at the front of it. And for about 30 seconds, it was going to be my ultimate man cave before my wife said, absolutely not. That's going to be a place where our guests come to visit, specifically my in-laws. And so we decorated that little guest house like a nice little hotel room. We put in a little coffee bar, a small refrigerator, a microwave, things like that. No intention of doing anything other than that. And that was probably summer of 2013, right when we had bought that house. And I remember on Christmas Day of 2013, my mom hands me this article about this company called Airbnb. And she said, hey, I think this would be a great thing for you to do with that little guest house at the front of the house. And I was like, yeah, whatever, Mom. Like I had done too many times in my adult life when my mom had come to me with business ideas, smart business ideas mostly. But I went away and I thought about it for about a month. And then I finally was like, all right, well, what's the harm? So I went out, I took some photos. I'm a photographer, took photos of the property, of the space, listed it on Airbnb and within 48 hours, we had our first booking. And we had 65% occupancy for until March of 2020. And we were one of the highest rated short-term listings in Las Vegas until we got shut down by COVID. That was kind of my intro into real estate. That was the, what do you call it? The taster.
The catalyst, the taster. Yeah, all the above, the snowball started right there. That is awesome. Ultimately, it's It's hard to hear about the condo. I was thinking about when you said 2005 of what a great time to buy real estate that was with 2008 coming. Of course, I don't have any experience with that, but I'm sure that was really difficult. One thing I wanted to pull from that though is like, given that difficult time that you had in 2005, to 2008 in the crash, was there ever any thought like, hey, real estate just doesn't make sense. I'm staying away from this. I'm not getting close to investing in real estate. Or were you kind of under the understanding of like, hey, here's a risk. Let me just keep going and start building after you saw the success with the house hack?
Oh, it took me a while. It took that house hack for me to kind of break out of that mindset of like, yeah, real estate, this is not for me. My dad had been a frustrated landlord back in the 80s. He bought a single family home, a couple of condos back when you could shelter your W-2 income with real estate. My mom at the time was making a lot of money as a television sales executive, and they got talked into buying a bunch of rental properties in order to shelter your income when you could do that. He hated it, was not very good at it. And so I kind of watched him struggle with it. Had never intended to be a real estate investor, even when I bought that condo. And it wasn't until I started getting that mailbox money from the short-term rental house hack that I was like, oh man, this is really good. This is not all that hard. It was hard in the beginning when we were kind of running things ourselves and we were cleaning the space ourselves. But once we kind of got our systems up and running and kind of figured it all out, it was really easy money. And I started looking for ways to scale that. All right, how can I scale my short-term rental portfolio? Because this is really working really well. And I started researching ways to do that. Came across a website called Afford Anything by a woman named Paula Pant.
Yeah, I know Paula Pant. Yep.
And she had written an article about some long-term rentals that she had, and she had converted one of them to a short-term rental. And she was just comparing the ROI and the return on time of a long-term rental versus a short-term rental. I don't remember anything about that article other than she didn't really like doing the short-term rental. But I remember over on the side on her website was a link for a website called Bigger Pockets. And I clicked on that link and I went down the rabbit hole for the next 6 months, as anybody who's discovered Bigger Pockets probably has as well. And that kind of expanded what I was looking at as far as real estate and looking at it beyond short-term rentals.
Yeah, absolutely. I went down that rabbit hole for a couple of years. Pockets has completely changed my life and a lot of other folks' lives as well, just with all the information that they offer and the podcasts and everything. So I'm definitely grateful for that. And I used to listen to the Afford Anything podcast, Paula Pant's podcast, way back in the day when that first started. I think it was like in Atlanta she had her properties, or maybe Savannah, but somewhere in Georgia. And that's awesome. Yeah, I think, one thing that's really important for folks that are listening is that just the power of house hacking. I still house hack my basement here in Colorado Springs, and we pretty much, if you average it out over the year, we pretty much live for free here in Colorado Springs. And people ask like, oh, what's your easiest property you have? Our basement is one of the easiest properties we have because we just have a cleaner. She comes in and cleans it. We have automated door locks. Everything's automated in terms of the booking and the messaging and all those sorts of things. And so if you put those systems in, it can really be a game changer. And it's been cool to kind of share that with folks. Like, hey, here's the space you don't really use. How can you potentially generate some income from that? And then I think for residents, doctors who are in their residency, it's an awesome opportunity. House hack, either that's renting by the room to your residency mates or renting out, a basement or something like that, just to generate some extra income, especially while you're working 80 plus hours. You're not really there anyways. You might as well just kind of utilize that and kind of set yourself up for success from that perspective. So house hacking is such an amazing way to get started in the real estate space.
Is your basement apartment a short-term rental, medium-term rental?
Yeah, we have it. It's listed as a short-term rental. We've kind of pivoted more towards a mid-term rental for a few reasons. One, we just like having it booked for those longer stays. It's just a little bit easier. It's set up really well for a mid-term rental. My wife is an amazing designer, photographer, et cetera, and she just did such an awesome job thinking through all the little things. And we've had some other Airbnbs prior to this that helped us out from that perspective. But yeah, midterm rental is nice. It's a little bit less income, but it's nice to know like, hey, this is rented out for the next 60 days or 45 days or whatever that may be. So we still get some short-term bookings here and there, but mostly we've kind of pivoted to midterm.
Yeah, I'm an evangelist when it comes to house hacking. I think so many people focus on reducing the wrong expenses. Everyone's focused on, just spend less on lattes, spend less on eating out, have fewer streaming services. Hey, listen, yes, absolutely be intentional about your spending. But if you can focus on reducing some of the largest expenses that most people have, which is housing and cars, I think you're going to end up way ahead of most people. I mean, I lived in Las Vegas when we were doing that short-term rental house hack. We lived for more than just free. We actually put money away. We were paying off our mortgage at an accelerated rate. Now, knowing what I know now, I wouldn't have done that. I would have probably found someplace else to put that money just because I understand the sort of opportunity cost of paying down, a low interest mortgage as opposed to reinvesting it. But I'm grateful for what I did, because what happened is we had kind of a double whammy. When we did eventually sell that house in the summer of 2020, we had paid down our mortgage to almost nothing. We owed $90,000 on that house, and it had also appreciated a lot in the 7 years that we'd owned it. So suddenly we had a huge amount of equity that we were able to then redeploy into our home where we live here now in North Carolina.
That's awesome. Yeah, it is just such a powerful tool. Incredible. So yeah, I think house hacking is such a great way to get on the right step towards financial independence. And I know the FIRE mindset kind of helped shape some of your decisions. What was that like for you? How did you initially get into that FIRE mindset? So financial independence, retire early, for folks that are listening. And how did that shape your decisions when you first learned about it? And what's that look like now for you?
I would say probably the first taste I had of it was probably Tim Ferriss's book, The 4-Hour Workweek. And just kind of, it was probably 2005, I want to say. It was shortly after that book came out. And just the whole idea of, what are we doing? Like you spend so much time working towards a retirement that when you hit 65, that a lot of times you've sort of burned away your best years. And that was the first kind of time where I was thinking, all right, well, how do I do that sooner? And Tim's book is great. I think it's kind of a oxymoron, 4-hour work week. It's just good marketing. I think the first time that I got exposed to someone who was really like doing the math on it was Mr. Money Mustache. He's got a website, and it was the first time I'd ever got exposure to the 4% rule, which if anybody, doesn't know what it is basically, or the 25X rule, which is, all right, to figure out what you need in order to be financially independent or to retire early, you need to figure out what it is you need to live, and you need to multiply that time by 25 times, or you need to take whatever your nest egg is that you plan to have in retirement and multiply that times 4%. And that will be essentially what you're allowed to spend in retirement. And that was the first time I'd ever had someone sort of explain that math to me. Before, I had always thought of myself as, all right, well, if I have $1 million, then I can live off 10% of that, because that's what the stock market earns. Well, the stock market goes up and down. I didn't know anything about the Trinity study. But it was the first time that I'd sort of had that thought about putting a number to what it would take for me to be financially independent. And I think then that sort of, as I became exposed to real estate, I also started sort of thinking about that as not just a nest egg approach, which is that big number. All right, I need $2 million saved in my nest egg before I can call myself financially independent. And that means I can live on about $80,000 a year. Whereas the real estate approach is, all right, how can I generate $80,000 a year in cash flow that's going to go on in perpetuity that I can then declare myself financially independent?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to look at it, kind of more active and passive income streams that then lead to FIRE, which is awesome. I was thinking about, as you were kind of talking through some of those principles and points, have you read the book Die with Zero by Bill Perkins?
I haven't actually, no.
It's a really, really good one. I feel like you're 100% right. The 4-hour work week kind of introduced that idea. One thing I think about, though, is a lot of us listening to this podcast, and I'm sure you as well, we're never the type of people that are going to just go like sip on the beach, sip Mai Tais on the beach forever. We'd be really bored with that. So I think the 4-hour work week does sound sexy, as you mentioned. But Die with Zero by Bill Perkins, really great book. Basically, he kind of, some key points for that may be helpful for folks who are listening to this is he talks about kind of prioritizing your spending on experiences, relationships that are going to provide lasting value rather than accumulating large amounts of wealth. And then like basically rethinking retirement where instead of delaying all your enjoyment till retirement, which we all know is flawed because hopefully you live to be 65 and then hopefully you're healthy enough to enjoy being 65. Why not instead aim to spread those experiences and spending kind of across your life and throughout your life? Maybe that does look like when your kids are younger, you work part-time, you don't make as much money, but at least you're able to spend that time with your kids and just kind of thinking more in the realm of like, hey, how can I take what I'm earning, take what I'm doing, take what I'm investing in, and then really enjoy my life now I have the health to do it and go from there. So it's a really great book. I highly recommend it. I just recently finished it and it's definitely made me think a lot about that and a lot about giving while you're still alive instead of that idea of like, hey, I want to leave this massive inheritance to my kids. And, hopefully I die when I'm in my 90s and my kids are in their 60s. Are they really going to need like a big lump sum inheritance when they're 60? Probably not. But maybe they need help with a down payment on their first house when they're 20, 25, and those sorts of things. So kind of thinking through how can you give throughout your life in ways that will be a really positive impact. So anyways, it's a really great book.
I'll add it to my list. I am a big believer. My wife and I are both big believers in experiences over things. I cannot tell you a single gift I got when I was 11 years old. But I remember our first family trip to Europe, and there's like specific things I remember. And all I have to do is look at a photograph from that trip, and I can go right back into that moment. And those memories are things that I treasure. My dad's gone now. My mom's still alive. And there's moments, my dad and I, for 18 straight years, we went fishing together in Alaska every summer. And I still look at photographs of that and I treasure those more than any toy, gift, thing, piece of clothing that I ever got as a gift from my parents. And the other thing is the idea of giving with a warm hand. I think obviously you need to be careful to not spoil your kids, to not reduce their drive and make them so comfortable that they can't get that drive themselves. But I also believe that, like you said, okay, well, what's the point of me dying at 90 with this huge inheritance that I now give to my 60-year-old kids, and I never get to see them enjoy it. I think those are two concepts that are a real driving force for me.
I love that. Yeah, I was reading something the other day, and it was kind of the first memories that kids can really recall are those family trips. They're those experiences that you had, as you mentioned. And I feel the same way. I would much prefer to do an awesome experience with my family and value that way, way more. We're super fortunate, during my time getting out of the Air Force and starting, I had about 3.5 months off, and we did a month-long trip to Yellowstone, the Tetons and Glacier, and our camper had a blast. And then we went to Europe for a month, and we're super fortunate that we were able to do that. And I was just thinking, man, I hope that my 4.5-year-old remembers something from that trip. And even if he doesn't, at least we have the pictures to look back on. And we have on my refrigerator, I can see it from here. We got a Polaroid camera. And we try and take 1 or 2 pictures per place wherever we go. And we just recently went to Rocky Mountain National Park, which is one of our favorites. And there's a picture of Jack, my 4.5-year-old, holding Owen, our 1-year-old, in his lap, and there's a moose behind them. And I'm like, that's so cool. I'm going to keep that forever. And it'll be so cool to look back on. And, they may not remember that. Owen certainly won't remember that, but it's just cool to have those experiences. And the coolest thing about that was on a Monday, and I didn't have to work, and I wasn't at work. And so putting the time in and having that financial freedom and flexibility can be awesome to be able to be like, hey, this is a Monday and I'm in Rocky Mountain National Park. And, it's just awesome. So I love to hear that. Do you have any other tips or tricks, Neil? You mentioned, with kids and trying not to spoil them and give them that silver spoon. Do you have any other tips or tricks or insights that you've learned along the way that can be helpful to kind of help kids appreciate and understand the value of money and the hard work it takes to make money?
Well, I think you need to start having a conversation early and just explain to them the idea of paying yourself first and getting them to conceptually, it's so hard because I think I even had my parents explain this to me when I was young, and And I think it took until I was 40 to really start to grasp it. But the whole idea of the power of time over money. And what I mean by that is sitting down and visually trying to explain to them the difference between somebody who starts saving $100 a month at age 18 and what that will turn into at age 60 versus somebody who's even saving $300 a month at age 30. And I haven't done the math on that, but I know that like the sooner you start, I can't remember. I think it's Warren Buffett that said, or I don't know who it was that said that compounding interest is the eighth wonder of the world. And it's absolutely true. And when you start earning 10% on money, you start putting that money away early is when that money starts to really take off. And getting your kids to understand that money, and it's hard because it's especially when and I still have not gotten through to my 11-year-old right now, is that saving money is not about saving to buy for something you want. Yes, you do need to do that. But like really saving money is putting money away for either retirement, buying a house, or starting a business. That, like the money, when I talk about paying yourself, that's what I mean. And it's hard. I don't have, honestly, you asked me if I have any advice or tips. I don't yet. I've got an 11-year-old, and I'll tell you, it is a struggle. That kid has money coming to his pocket, and he's immediately thinking on ways to spend it. And we're starting to have pretty in-depth conversations about him, like generally having an interest in what it is I do and why that is, and why it's important to save money. And it's hard because we've got generous grandparents who, when you tell them, hey, you need to save that money, if you want that thing, you need to save your money. So, I'll just ask grandmommy and papa for it. They'll get it for me. And having to, have that conversation with them. Good luck on that, by the way, to not spoil the kids. I don't know. That was a long rambling question to say, I don't have a whole lot of advice.
No, that's totally fine. It is tough. I completely agree. And it's definitely something we're working on here in the Schloe house. I heard Scott Donnell on the Better Life podcast with Brandon Turner, and he was on Action Academy podcast as well. And he's got some really awesome insights. And we just started doing this with our 4.5-year-old. We have 3 different jars, and they're labeled on the jars. There's a save jar, there's a spend jar, there's a share jar. And we've used that, and he's got some tasks that he can do. Scott O'Donnell calls them gigs that he can do, and he can earn money. And it's like, hey, if you feed the dog without us asking you to do it, we'll give you $0.25, and everything's $0.25. And if he puts and then he can pick of those 3 jars what he wants to put it in: the save jar, the spend jar, or the share jar. And if he puts it in the save jar, we'll double it. We'll put another $0.25 in. If he puts it in the spend or the share, we don't. But it's been really, really helpful for him as a 4.5-year-old to start kind of understanding money. I think everything for the most part still goes in the spend jar, and then he goes and buys like a Sonic Nerf gun or whatever. But that money is for him to spend. And he's got to learn that, like, hey, once that spend jar is empty, it's time to get back to work. And so that's been really, really helpful for us. But I love asking folks that question because I just want to learn, how to do that. And, it's such an awesome experience being a dad, but some things are challenging and a lot of things are challenging. And money is a challenging discussion too.
And it changes every year.
Yeah, exactly.
As soon as you think you've got a handle on you've read the instruction manual on your 8-year-old, suddenly they're a 9-year-old and things change.
Yeah, I couldn't believe that. Jack, everyone says the terrible 2 is 2 was fine. The minute he turned 3, it was, wow, I'm like, who is this kid? And then now he's 4 and it's completely different. You're exactly right. It is such a joy, and it's super fun. Well, I feel like that was a really great conversation that a lot of folks need to have and think about. I do want to pivot a little bit kind of more into commercial real estate with you. So I know you guys are largely invested in the self-storage space. And so I was wondering, Neil, what attracted you to self-storage specifically versus multifamily or some of these other commercial asset classes?
Well, the first thing that attracted me to commercial real estate, period, when I was sitting there, when I spent a good year and a half digesting bigger pockets and all the different strategies and lease option sandwiches and small multifamily and large multifamily and, short-term rentals and all that, was the idea of how predictable it is. With residential real estate, you're buying on a comp. You're buying, in an area where houses sell for, $200 a square foot or whatever. And when you're going to value that property, it's going to be based on the other properties that are like it in that market. And it's really, the value is going to be very based on, just how people, what people think about the area, whether or not they like the yard or the color of the paint and things like that. Whereas commercial real estate, it's a simple formula. You've got the gross revenue minus the expenses equals the NOI, the net operating income. And net operating income is how much income the property is producing, not including the debt service. And then you just divide that by the cap rate, and that gives you the value. And so you can very predictably turn these dials to increase the cash flow on a property, but increase the value of the property even more based on the cap rate. And so that was the first thing that drew me to it. I started raising some capital for some multifamily deals. It was multifamily syndication back in the sort of early days when the Koji P model wasn't quite as frowned upon. But I saw a guy named Scott Myers get up and speak about self-storage investing about the same time I heard about commercial real estate investing. And it just clicked with me. It's like, all right, well, this is basically, it's multifamily, it's multi-tenant real estate, except it's a lot simpler. You're essentially renting people a box of air. There's no long-term leases. There's no plumbing. There's no toilets. There's no trash. Well, there is trash, but it's not, it's not like a dumpster that is constantly getting filled up by the residents. And the same metrics apply as multifamily. If you can find a way to increase the net operating income, you can create enormous value. So I started looking for a way to buy a self-storage facility on my own. I got educated. I paid too much money to learn about it and absolutely beat my head against the wall trying to buy my first self-storage facility. And the problem I was running into was I lived in Las Vegas, and Las Vegas is a primary market. There's not a lot of starter facilities in Las Vegas, and there's no little secondary and tertiary markets on the outskirts of Las Vegas where a new self-storage investor could maybe get in and buy a 10,000 or 15,000 square foot facility for $500,000 and then learn and grow that way. Las Vegas is on kind of a little island. I had met my now business partner in 2017. He's a self-storage investor, had 3 or 4 facilities on his own that he had built from the ground, done all himself without investors. And I had raised some money for multifamily syndications. I knew a little bit about podcasting and multimedia. I knew some stuff about education. And I started looking for ways that I could add value to him. And I started encouraging him to syndicate. And he wasn't ready. He was like, nope, I'm not ready. We're still building up our own portfolio, improving the concept with our own money. And he was smart. I'm glad he did it that way. And then in February of 2020, we were at the Best Ever conference, and I took him and his son aside, Levi, who are the 2 principals at Nomad before there was a Nomad. And I said, hey, listen, I want to help you guys get to $100 million in assets under management. And they said, let's go. Yes. It was the first time they finally were like, all right, let's do it. So we all went back our separate ways. They were in North Carolina at the time. I was still in Las Vegas. And then COVID hit and my world absolutely came apart. My dad died essentially the day that COVID became a thing. All got shut down. Our Airbnb got shut down both by the pandemic and the city, because the city of Las Vegas had steadily become more and more hostile to short-term rentals. And so that delayed us about a year. I sort of pulled back, we all kind of pulled back, tried to figure out what was going on with COVID. I sold my house moved in with my mom because she was, newly a widow. We were sort of became our own little pod, but I stayed in touch with Eric, and they, sort of as COVID sort of came out, they started looking for their first syndicated deal. They did that. They syndicated that first deal in October, November of 21, right about the time I was literally driving across the country to move to Wilmington. And that was our first syndicated deal. And we syndicated, I think, 4 properties in 4 or 5 in 2022. And we were off to the races.
That's awesome. I think one key thing I wanted to pull out from that was your willingness to add value and your understanding to add value to the Nomad Capital team before it existed, and that is why they were willing to partner with you. You didn't come probably be like, hey, can I pick your brain or take you to a cup of coffee or whatever. You came in and you said, hey, I want to help you grow to $100 million in assets. Here's how I can do it. Here's my experience. How can I add value? And that's how that partnership came to be. And so what do you think, makes a good partnership? If you had to tell someone who's like, hey, I want to partner with someone, what do you think makes a good partnership, or what do you look for in terms of partnering with someone?
Let's say 2 things. One is just compatibility. I mean, when you're going into a partnership, it's like a marriage. And I think you need to treat it like a marriage. You need to date. You need to spend time with this person for a long time. And I'd known Eric since February of 2017, and we didn't partner up until October of 21. So that was more than 4 years, 4.5 years almost. And we danced around each other for a long time. So I would say we dated for a long period of time. And even then, it took another year before I would say that our partnership was really solidified. And it was really touch and go there for a while. And the other thing is, what do you bring to the partnership that the other person doesn't have? Eric was a general contractor. Eric has one of the most well-developed risk muscles of any person I've ever known. And he didn't get that by reading books. He did it by getting out there and taking action. And he took his lumps. I didn't have a lot of experience. What I did know how to do was educate investors on commercial real estate and self-storage. I knew multimedia. I knew how to raise a little bit of capital, not a lot. I wasn't like a master capital raiser when I came to Eric and said, let's do this. But he didn't really want to go out there raising capital, didn't want to really be talking to investors. He could do it, but it was not really it's not something he really enjoyed. I enjoy it. And it's not the sales side of it. Clint is the salesman, my partner, Clint. Clint's a sales guy. He thrives on it. I thrive on having interesting conversations with investors and educating them about who we are, what it is we do, what our strategy is, and then learning whether or not their goals and their experience lines up with what we're doing. And if it does, hey, great. You want to invest with us? Perfect. If not, no hard feelings. Listen, there's just lots of opportunities out there, and there's lots of opportunities that are going to fit better with what it is that they're trying to do. And that was it. I just came in and was like, all right. And it wasn't even like a defined, well, you're going to do this and you're going to do this. It took us a while to kind of figure it out. But once we did figure it out, and even with my partnership with Clint, he's much more of the sales guy, and I'm much more of the systems, processes, and funnels, and figuring all that, and customer service and education side of it. So you really need to figure it out, what it is that you're really good at and what you enjoy doing. And I think that if you're good at it and you enjoy it, that's probably the value that you're going to bring to a partnership.
Yeah, that's really well said. We're working through that, consistently in our business as well of, hey, what's the thing that really lights us up? What do we really enjoy doing? And what are the things that we don't as a business and as a partnership? And then let's figure out, hey, how can we, offload those to people who do enjoy doing it? Because it's not really work if you really love what you're doing, and you're going to grow so much faster with partners that are going to build you up and strengthen you and help the business grow doing things that they're passionate about. So I think that is really great advice. Let's pivot a little bit to Nomad Capital and talk about strategy, as you mentioned. So what is Nomad Capital's strategy? What is the strategy within the self-storage space?
Yeah, we do self-storage, but we do it with a little bit of a twist. I would say there are 5 primary strategies when it comes to self-storage investing. You can build from the ground up. You can buy an existing facility that needs an operational turnaround. You can build a facility that has some room to expand, or you can do a conversion. I said there was a 5th. Oh, and the 5th is literally you can just buy it for cash flow. And we've done, I would say, 4 of those. Eric built his first facility from the ground up. He did a conversion, was his second one. He bought an old print shop and converted it into a self-storage facility. And then he bought an existing conversion that needed an operational turnaround. And then he bought an existing facility that had room to expand. And the reason we love the conversion model is because we can buy buildings for pennies on the dollar. These are mostly buildings that have been vacant for a long time. We've bought everything from a vacant Kmart to an old bottling facility, an old grocery store. And a lot of times we're buying them for less than their replacement cost. And if anyone's ever read any Sam Zell, who's a very famous commercial real estate investor, like that was his big thing, was like, if you just buy below replacement cost, you're going to it's hard not to make money. So we're usually targeting to buy something for less than replacement cost, around $25 a square foot. That's gone up a little bit recently, sometimes 25 to 35. And then it takes us about $40 to $45 a square foot to convert it, which means we're all in. Our last 5 projects, we were all in at $65 a square foot. That includes the price of the land, the conversion, everything, the parking lot, all the entitlement, everything. And Alex, if you and I were to go out and build a self-storage facility from the ground up, it's normally going to cost us about $120 a square foot, not including the price of the land and the entitlement and all that. So we're already in for almost, we're in for 50% of the cost. We're also typically, it's only going to take us about 12 months from the time, on average, from the time that we've bought it to the time we're opening our doors and leasing up. Whereas if you take a vacant piece of land and you now need to entitle it for storage, make sure it's zoned correctly, get through all the permitting process with the city, get it graded, put it in the infrastructure and all that, you can be talking anywhere from 12 to 36 months before you seriously start going vertical. And so we love it because we're in it for half the cost typically and in about half the time.
That's amazing. Yeah. I mean, and that's just true fundamentals right there that are going to work time and time and time again. And what an awesome way to do it. Neil, where do you see the self-storage industry growing, especially as Americans continue to buy more and more stuff?
Yeah, we keep waiting for it to, you'll listen to an average consumer and you tell them, well, we're going to build a self-storage facility. They roll their eyes. Oh, great, another self-storage facility. And the reality is that storage is a very localized market and it's a commodity. So you're talking anywhere from a 1 to 3 to 5 mile radius, sometimes even a 10-mile radius, depending how dense the population is. That's the market for a self-storage facility. And it can be even less than a mile if you're talking a really, really like a dense population like New York City. And so that's really what you're looking for, are these little pockets of demand for storage. And as much as, and I would say the argument, you had a lot of people over the last 20, 30 years who describe self-storage as recession proof. I would have never described it as recession proof. I was always describe it as recession resilient because it's a trauma and transition business. People, when people have a lot of money, they tend to, buy a lot of stuff. They're moving, they're buying new houses, they're refurbishing their house, and they need some place to store their stuff. When times are bad, they're downsizing and they're moving, they're loath to get rid of their stuff. They're moving around. Storage over the last 3 years has actually really been in what I would call a bear market. We had this post-COVID boom up to about 2021 where, everyone was, there were a ton of people moving around. There were people converting bedrooms into home offices because they're working remote, turning them into homeschool rooms because now they're homeschooling their kids. And so storage had this huge boom. And then all of a sudden, interest rates shot up in 22, 23, home prices shot up, and it froze the housing market. And all of a sudden, you had one of the primary drivers of storage demand, which is people moving around, drop off a cliff. Now, even with all that, I can tell you most of our projects have been in lease up since that time. And it's been a struggle. It's been a dogfight leasing those facilities up. You'll normally lease up a storage facility historically at about 3% per month, which means it's going to take you about 28 to 30 months to lease from empty to a stabilized facility. Well, we saw that demand drop down to about 1.2 to 1.5% per month, which now You're talking a lease up's going to take 48 months, 62 months. And that, and that you start burning through your reserve in a hurry. So a lot of, and this is a long-winded way of getting to where do I see storage going? What we've seen over the last 3 years is there was this big peak of storage construction that happened right around COVID. And then as those interest rates, housing, the demand started dropping off, the cost of construction went up, all these groups that were, building self-storage, building new self-storage, they've slowly been pulling back and they're dropping, and the number of facilities getting built has been dropping like a rock. And we anticipate it's going to continue to drop through like 2027, 2028. Now, in the meantime, we anticipate, and we are starting to see it, is the demand is starting to come back as those interest rates start to ease up, as people finally just, get tired of, they get used to the where the housing costs are. People are starting to move again. So we're starting to see demand start coming back to what just would be normal. And at the same time, there's all these groups that are putting together billion-dollar funds to purchase self-storage. So for us, what we're looking to be is we want to ride that wave as the supply of new self-storage facilities dries up. We want to have product available out there for those groups that are looking to place that billions of dollars. We want to be that place where they put that money. Because essentially what's happening in self-storage, it's been happening for 10 years, is a consolidation. You've got all these mom and pop facilities, baby boomer owners that are retiring. They're selling their single facility to groups that are, operating either 3, 5, 20 facilities. They're professional management. They've got online. They're doing, they're going completely automated and things like that. So that's my very, very long-winded way of getting to kind of explaining where I see self-storage going over the next 5 years.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you for that. Yeah, I think it's definitely a good private equity play going forward in that consolidation. And, we're kind of thinking long-term about that. Similarly in the assisted living space is, right now, a lot of big private equity firms and money, they're going after these really large facilities, think like your Brookdale, et cetera. And then that's going to start trickling down to these smaller and smaller facilities. And so if you're there and you're ready and your goal is to potentially sell to private equity and go from there, there's a great opportunity there as well. And it's interesting, you mentioned the kind of silver tsunami or the mom and pop operators. It's always interesting to me to see how many different real estate asset classes this aging generation is impacting. And so there's a lot of opportunity in that space as well. Neil, you host the Truly Passive Income podcast, which is awesome. In your mind, what does truly passive income look like? And what are some insights or thoughts or even key takeaways that continue to come up during your podcast?
Well, you search for the term passive income on Google, and the joke is most of what you see is not passive income. There's a lot of people out there selling passive income. And it's kind of the joke with our podcast, Truly Passive Income, is there's not really any truly passive income. Really, The only truly passive income is maybe putting your money into a savings account and sitting back and doing nothing. Even a even a strictly stock portfolio where you're just buying, index funds, requires a little bit of management, a little bit of balance. Mostly what people consider to be passive income is usually residual income. You front load the work, you build systems, you build a business, and you sit back and you collect it. So for me, it's passive income is about taking my capital that I have traded my life energy for, doing things that I don't necessarily want to do. Let's put it this way. I'd rather be doing those things with my family, taking the capital that I've earned and then placing it with someone who has the time and experience to put it to work and give me a good return. And that's the same whether I'm investing in an index fund or a syndication, private equity, venture capital, whatever. I've taken the money, the life energy that I've spent over years and years and getting it into the hands of someone who has the time and experience to put it to work and earn me that truly passive income.
Yeah, I love that. It's kind of, how to leverage your time. And I think that, kind of a good segue into that is for folks who are listening to this, for physicians who may be listening to this that want to, figure out how they can leverage time, experience, money. What are some good ways to do that?
Well, here's the challenge is that when I was learning about real estate, I didn't have a lot of time, I didn't have any experience, and I didn't have a lot of money. And what I did have was enough time to start a podcast on my own, which then gave me an opportunity to talk to people who had more experience than I did without just like calling them up and taking them to coffee. And so that allowed me to sort of build up a network and get some experience. But the dirty secret is that most people who have a lot of money or they're a high earner, really, they should probably keep the main thing the main thing. If you're a doctor, if you're a lawyer, if you are, if you're a business owner who's already earning a high income, is it really going to benefit you to go out and buy a short-term rental and run it? Like maybe it will. Or is it like or a self-storage facility, even worse? Because everyone thinks they'll get sold on the fact that, well, self-storage, it's kind of a hands-off business. Excuse my French, bullshit. Absolutely. Anybody who tells you that it's a hands-off business is selling you a course. Sorry. But what you should really be doing is getting yourself as educated as you can on these various asset classes, whether it be assisted living facilities, self-storage, multifamily, mobile home parks, whatever, and then find someone who has the time and experience to put your money to work. And I'm saying that and I know this sounds like I'm selling you on something, but I think so many people get it in their head that, well, I could do that. If you're a doctor or a business owner who's working a lot, I'm telling you, no, you probably can't. And you're probably better served by using your money and placing that with someone who has the time and experience to put that money to work and give you a better return than you would get in the stock market.
Yeah, I agree. It's certainly situational and, certainly funneling, high income earners working a little bit more of that money into more passive investments can certainly make more sense. And I think that is really helpful. And it's, as we've kind of mentioned all along, it just takes getting started. Like for you, it was that house hack in Las Vegas, and then it just kept snowballing to now this incredible company with Nomad Capital. For me, it was a small house in Florida that I bought $58 out of my pocket using a physician loan. And it's just being willing to take action and just see where that leads is really, really helpful. Neil, as we kind of wrap things up here, I want to ask how folks can find your podcast. And is there anything else that you want folks to know or anything else you want to hit on? And then please feel free to share how folks can reach out to you, learn more about Nomad Capital, your podcast, connect with you, et cetera.
Yeah. If you search for truly passive income anywhere that you listen to podcasts, it will come up. And then as far as how to contact me, nomadcapital.us is our website. And feel free to email me, Neil, Neil, @nomadcapital.us.
Awesome. We'll be sure to include all the links in the show notes there. Neil, thank you so much for sharing your journey on the podcast today. I really appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure, Alex. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, with that, it's been Neil Henderson and Dr. Alex Schloe with another episode of the Physicians and Properties podcast, signing off. Hey, real quick, if you're still listening to this, I'm assuming you got value from it. So I need your help specifically. My 2-year vision with this podcast is to help 100,000 physicians learn how investing in real estate can give you the freedom to practice medicine and live life how you want. There are 2 main ways that a podcast grows. One is through ratings and reviews, and the other is word of mouth. If you can please leave me a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, as well as send this to 1 to 2 friends that you think would get value from it, we can reach the physicians that we want to reach. Thanks in advance, and talk to you on the next episode. Please note that the information shared on this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered financial or medical advice. The views expressed on this podcast are those of the host and the guest and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Department of Defense or the United States Air Force.